You've probably noticed that Claude can do almost anything. It's powerful, it's versatile, and honestly, sometimes it's too much. You ask for one thing and you get back a featured packed solution when all you need is something simple. That extra complexity, it eats away at your time and your energy. It clutters your workflow and it forces you to try and put a round peg in a square hole, um, for things that you didn't ask for in the first place. So today I'm going to show you how to dial back on some of Claude's robustness to get exactly what you need. Stick around and see what I made happen when I got curious about the Claude skills and how I could fit it into my workflow for my content creation. I'm Lee Drozak, and I'm all about fitting technology into the systems that you have, not reinventing the wheel to make things happen. So let's get into it. A little backstory. Claude introduced this thing called skills. And what skills does is you give it a set of instructions and it makes things happen. So it all started when I wanted to learn about skills. And at first, I was really confused about it. What's the purpose? What does it do? And the long story short of it is it's a way to have Claude automate or do tasks for you without you having to know complicated coding or instructions. And so after I got clear on that, the first thing that I realized is that the skills are application wide, meaning that you put the skill into Claude and it can be used across multiple projects, multiple threads, etc. And so I am in the midst of trying to automate my content creation process so that it takes all of my pieces and kind of puts them together. And instead of me wasting a lot of time searching for the different components, it assembles them so that I can write faster, create faster, edit faster. And it starts with my story refiner. So I just recorded a video last week on how I changed up the whole story refiner process from a custom GPT to making it into a Claude project so that I didn't have pieces everywhere of the different components. So now that the story refiner process is kind of in play and where I need it to be, the second piece of the puzzle was to automate it into a Notion space that kind of is my collective, my database of all the stories that I have refined that are ready to use in the future or to be reused in the future. So the way that it worked was I had created the project and I had the different components, and then I was manually copying, pasting them into Notion, which the disruption in the process was where I wanted to fix that. If I could automate taking the finished, refined story in Claude and moving it to Notion without me having to manually do it, that would save me a lot of energy. And so I thought, well, I'll just build a skill, right? Because that's the whole idea of the skill is to help you to automate these things. So as I'm building the skill, I'm now getting confused because not only this is part of my process, and part of my process is having these different smaller Notion databases that all play together. So as I'm talking to Claude about this skill, I was like, okay, how does it know what database to put this in? And that was the question that kind of veered me off into this amazing answer for a question that I knew I had, but I didn't know how to address. You might have 3 projects that could utilize a skill. And so rather than reinventing the wheel in each project, you create a skill. But I only needed one automation in one place, and that was my story refiner project. And so that's where we begin. So the story refiner is a project. And what I did was I added my context files here and then my instructions. The instructions are how I refine a story and how I'm having Claude to help me refine that story. So what it does is it goes through the process where I put in the initial draft. It asks me some questions, goes through the refinement and editing process, and then it spits out the results, which is the story snapshot, the headlines, the refined story, the components. So that's where it would end. And then what I would do was I copy and pasted each of these sections into a Notion database to be used in the future. It didn't take a lot of time to copy and paste it, but it was bouncing back and forth. So you know how that is. You lose like momentum and energy when you're copying from here and then you're going over to Notion and you're pasting it into the field and back and forth and back and forth. Now, I did this on a split screen. So it didn't take that much time, but it took a lot of energy. And so I figured there's got to be a better way to do it. When I was talking with Claude about building a skill for the automating this, and what had happened was once I got the skill refined, then I was like, okay, how does it know which database to post these to? If I'm making a skill across the board and I want this to be part of the bigger picture, what happens then? So I started asking those questions that you ask when you're trying to clarify in your mind the steps that you take for the process, giving it the context that you need. It's kind of like when you're using a GPS and it gives you the directions, but you know that there's a side street that can cut off a little bit of time or traffic. So you ask it like, "Why can't I go on that street instead of this street?" And it says, "Okay, recalculating." And that's kind of what we did here was we were in the recalculating phase. So a lot of back and forth. I had some issues with it. There were some problems and I kept at it because it would work one day, next day it wouldn't. And I knew that it was possible. And I knew that this would save me a little bit of heartache and headache in my overall process of manually doing something. So, long story short, it came up with a Notion integration that allowed me to pop this into the instructions. So, if you go to the story refiner and in the instructions now at the very bottom is the part that says, okay, the story is refined. The next thing we're going to do is take all these pieces and put it into Notion in this particular database. And so that's what happened. So the one thing that I was getting stuck on was each of my stories, I give it a 3 to 5 word title so that it kind of jogs my memory of what that story is about. And that's when I said, okay, this is what starts the process. And it was like perfect. Now, after it refines the story, then we go into the Notion integration. And it asks for a short title for Notion because that's what I told it my first step is. And then once I provide that, it will save the story into the database with all the components extracted to be ready to used in the future. So I just copy and paste this now, put it in there, and then I hit enter, and it says, okay, now I'm going to do my thing. And so this is the part where the magic happens, where it takes all the pieces and it tells it where to go and what to do. And I don't have to do anything. This is done automatically, but just so you can kind of see the behind the scenes work. And then once it's done, it spits me out a URL so that I can either have it for additional context or that I can have it to check the record. I do check the record because, like I said, when I first started, I was having an issue with the connection until I figured out that it was just a formatting issue in the instructions. And so now if you click on the link, what it does is it takes me to the Notion database, and you'll see each of the parts are in here and they're formatted like I asked it to be formatted. And then it gives me a date created so that I know when this was popped in here. And then the story, I asked it to be put in the body because I like how it has the formatting done. Even though it's minimal, it's still a formatted text. And then now it's ready to use. It's part of my big picture for my story components. And I don't have to do anything other than pick a name for this story. So I took what was a problem of automation that I was going to have to create this scenario in Make or Zapier, and I just put the same context of it, the same components of it into Claude. And so I didn't need a skill. I just needed the correct instructions to make that happen. So the gap between needing help and getting the right sized help is smaller than you think. Once you master asking the right questions and giving the right context, you stop fighting all of the capabilities and start using the ones that are relevant for you. So basically, you can utilize Claude's best features without being overwhelmed with the pieces that you don't need or that are not relevant to your process. And in the meantime, you're not reworking your whole process or your whole system to make that round peg fit into that square hole. So that's it in a nutshell. Don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue refining this content creation process and the different pieces of AI that you can utilize to save you time, energy, and costs. And here's what's coming next. The Shift Your Context workshop is designed and almost ready to be released. And it is created to help you to create the documents that make using AI easier because you have all of your context at your fingertips. When you have the right context built in, Claude or any AI works smarter for you. And that's exactly what happened here. So I'll see you in the next video, and thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.